How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 8. We are halfway through the semester here, which is good. And really kind of from here on out, it's going to be kind of history related. We're done with, we sort of learned about the world of 1500, transition to look at products and kind of how they related to world history. A lot of those themes, probably themes that you came up with in your paper, will be and some that we read about, particularly sort of tea and opium wars, imperialism. Hopefully, we'll kind of tie into some of the topics and themes that we cover in the remainder of the semester. So, and for now, we're what I call vaulting to modernity. We're going to move very quickly through a lot of movements and changes that have really shaped the modern world. We're going to look at things like shifts in religions, shifts in economies, shifts in thinking, science, and politics. That again result in the world we have around us now. One of the themes that we kind of talk about that's brought up in the lectures is this cause and effect. A lot of these causes and changes, particularly the age of expansion, made Europe drastically change and become sort of a major player within the world stage. And then a lot of the ideas that were coming out of Europe during this time also altered the world as well as colonization led to imperialism, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's why a lot of sort of this vaulting modernity is sort of centered in Europe. I don't want to be Eurocentric about it, but a lot of the ideas and concepts that were coming out of the world and shaping the world were from Europe. And that's not to say that there isn't science and economies and religions and knowledge in other parts of the world. There definitely are, and those are just as valid. It's just some of the things like industrialization that borrowed from science and required a lot of resources and economic systems sort of in the crucible. We'll talk about how it sort of creates and comes up and why it comes up in Europe at that time, but then obviously radiated out on a global scale. So kind of some of the things we're going to go through. Now, this week, we're going to look at religion and science. We look at religion in the context of Europe first, in the Protestant Reformation, which very much drastically changed some of the Christianity in general. That was coupled very much with this new innovation of the printing press, which allowed for the dissemination of knowledge. Again, this is a good example of how science and innovation moves. The printing press was originally created in China, came through, and this technology moved through Islamic ways, but then was adopted in 1453-ish in Europe, and in Gutenberg, Johannes Gutenberg, kind of made this thing. This printing press used movable type, so you could make pamphlets, spread ideas. One of the first ones that was made was the Bible, but then these 95 Theses from Luther, they wouldn't have really had the impact they had without people being able to read these, right? It's the first sort of text message. People were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Spread, disrupted a lot of things, advocated for new connections with religion, which is very similar, and that's why we kind of connected with Bhakti, is that a similar movement happened in India, that the shift away from sort of like very closed up, you could only pray through priests and at temples, to anyone could commune with God or gods, and that's sort of what the Bhakti movement is. And then it's interesting that Bhakti movement then kind of comes and spreads into the West, and that's where some of the contemporary sort of vaulting to modernity, this idea of yoga, some of those ideas you can see spread up through these new changing ideas. So similar sort of trajectories, religious trajectories, and what was going on in Europe and also in South Asia. And then the other part of that is science. As people were sort of questioning religion, new thoughts came up to maybe think about how the world was created, or where the place of the sun versus the earth is, this heliocentrism. But once people started questioning those, they looked for other answers, and that's just empirical evidence and ration and reason. How can we look at the world around us and think about that? And what started in science will, as we will go through, gets then turned on the gaze of humanity. What are some laws, natural laws, that govern us and our relations and politics? And that's kind of these questions and ideas will then germinate and come about. So that's sort of the two elements of vaulting to modernity. The intro talks about others that we'll cover soon. Discussion posts, just kind of be thinking about that. What are these religious changes? What are these scientific changes? Choose one of them. Also use the reading. Use a quote from the reading from the course reading. I mean, if you do it AI, it's going to pop up something that is not from the course reading, and I'll be like, all right. Yeah, just kind of what you think about that in the discussion post there. And then product papers, I'm still working through them. I'm going to try to get them by the end of the week, but I might have to push it to the weekend. Sorry about that. And then the last point I want to talk about is the halfway through point through the semester. If you look on this student resources, I've put up the Ka'au framework. Again, Ka'au, the story that, at Hawaii Community College, we're kind of trying to think about or apply. The idea of college is bigger than just taking classes, right? It is part of the chapter, the story of your life that you're writing. So we're halfway through this Huaka'i element of the Ka'au framework. We're on a trip, 16-week trip. We're halfway through, as most trips are. They're not always smooth sailing, though I hope for the most part yours are relatively smooth. But it's also a good time to reflect, right? And right above this, I put the Ka'au framework, and I'd like you to think about. You don't have to turn these in, but just think about 3 different questions, right? One, sort of reflect on your hua, like what your motivation in the beginning of the semester. Is it still there? Has it been consistent, or has it been modified a little bit? Either are great. You can, that's what journeys are to reflect on. But the two, since we're in the middle of this element or Huaka'i, that I think are interesting to look at are, think about what's one thing you've accomplished this semester. It's always good to, in periods of reflection, to what have you done well, right? Everyone's done, in the last 8 weeks, you've accomplished something, whether in this class or another class, or maybe outside of classes in general. But make a list of that and start documenting those. What have you done, right? Accentuate the positive. And then the second question is, now that you're here, you kind of have the routine and everything, what's one thing you need to do to succeed, to complete this Huaka'i and feel good about it? So just kind of reflect about that. Again, you don't need to turn it in. It's not an assignment. I think it's good at this point of the semester to reassess what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then, hunker down for this last little bit, and then it'll be over. And then we'll be on to the next one, the next Huaka'i. So, all right, great. That's it. Have a good rest of your week.